Hey guys, tonight we drift across a mirror-black lake just before the sun even thinks of clocking in. You kneel in a slender canoe, its wooden ribs creaking like sleepy bones, and dip your paddle into water that looks more ink than liquid. A low torch flickers at the prow, painting gold smears on the mist. Lake birds mutter. Someone's dog in the distant barrio insists on a pre-dawn solo, and the air smells of wet earth with a sly note of charcoal from last night's cooking fires. You ease forward, breath matching the dip-pull rhythm, and glimpse the faint silhouette of your family chinampa, the floating garden that will demand your muscle, wit, and an optimistic sense of humour for the next few hours. One glance at the grey vapour curling over the canals and you know, if the mosquitoes don't devour you, the morning chores might. You probably won't survive this without at least one sarcastic eye roll. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And whether you're in Winnipeg at 3 a.m. or Manila at lunchtime, drop your location and local time down below. I love seeing our sleepy little map light up. Now, dim the lights, maybe fluff your pillows, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shift your weight, making sure the maize sacks behind you don't tip. Remember, no one wants to fish soggy kernels out of the drink. Cool vapour hugs your arms while the paddle parts the water with almost guillotine precision, though far gentler, of course, and legally less problematic. Ahead, willow roots fringe the chinampa like a scruffy beard, anchoring the artificial island into the lake bed. Mainstream fact time. These man-made plots were engineering marvels of the post-classic era, layered with reeds, mud and rotting vegetation until they formed steady platforms sturdy enough to grow gourds or, on a dare, a small army of sunflowers. Tenochtitlan's markets once thrummed with produce born from exactly this kind of dawn hustle. A heron flashes past, startled by your torch. Apparently no one briefed him on your arrival. The lake, called Xochimilco by imperial scribes, breathes out swirls of fog that tangle in your hair. A fringed tidbit slips into your thoughts. Elders whisper that the mist is the sigh of the lake goddess, Ayuchihuatl, who keeps score of every respectful greeting and every skipped offering. Rumour says she's even keeping an Excel sheet, which is terrifying given the era. You mutter a polite, "Tla, noble signora," just in case, because nothing wrecks harvest vibes like supernatural audit season. Your paddle nicks something soft. You halt and scoop up a clump of floating duckweed. Into the canoe it goes, future food for turkeys back home. A low laugh escapes you, Aztec recycling at its finest. You stretch, arms wide, and inhale the scent of chinampa mud, a smell equal parts greenhouse, river funk, and secrets. It's said that warriors applied an improvised sunscreen of crocodile dung and cactus sap during long marches. Not wanting to smell like a reptile's after-party, you settle for a humble smear of lake clay on your cheeks. It's cooling, mineral-rich, and, bonus, deters the gossiping midges. Be honest, modern SPF tubes suddenly seem less romantic. Torch crackles. Your first task is checking the canal poles that guide neighbour barges around the garden rather than through it, because nothing says, "Good morning," like a canoe crashing into your freshly sprouted amaranth. You tug one pole, feel the willow lashings hold, then tap it with knuckles for luck. Tap tap. Still snug. Mainstream fact number 2 takes the stage. Chinampa farmers often interplanted willow, alder, and cypress along the edges. Their roots stabilised soil, while branches offered ready stakes, shade, and occasional materials for, say, canoe patches, when the family dog mistook the hull for a chew toy. A skittering noise near your feet draws your eye to a cluster of axolotl hatchlings wriggling in the shallows. Cute, pink, and perpetually smiling, they look like the universe's failed attempt at a water dragon emoji. Quirky tidbit 2. Superstition claims whisper singing to axolotls ensures quick maize germination. You hum a fragment of a marketplace tune, something about love, tortillas, and losing all your cacao beans on date night. The hatchlings bob approvingly. Or maybe that's just water physics. As dawn's first blush creeps across the volcanic skyline, a second canoe passes, the rower bundled in a maguey fibre cloak. You greet him with a nod. He responds with a sleepy, "Quali tonali," meaning good day, though his tone says, "Please hand me a pillow." Joke number 2 flaps into place. You briefly consider opening a lakeside coffee franchise. Call it Star Maxwell. Logo pending. Now time to unload supplies. Maize seed for today's top dressing, a burlap sack of nutrient-rich sludge you dredged yesterday, and an obsidian-bladed digging stick polished smoother than your comedic timing. You lift each item as though performing a silent honor guard, mindful not to wake the tadpoles still dreaming by the roots. The sun lifts a single fiery eyelash above the horizon, and just like that, the torch's job is done. You snuff it with a hiss, smoke curling around your fingers like fretful spirits late for curfew. You roll your shoulders, feel late cold droplets sliver down your spine, and laugh softly. That's joke number 3, a private one about career choices your younger self definitely did not foresee. There's comfort, though, in the rhythm of dawn chores, a whispered promise that by the time the city stirs, you'll have coaxed life from mud, water, and morning slides across the sky like a shy iguana, warming the mist to a pale lavender as you kneel beside the first row of maize. The stalks loom head-high, dew-pearled and half asleep, leaves rustling in a hush that feels like botanical gossip. You run your fingertips along one blade, cool, slick, eager for a drink, and whisper a greeting you learned from your grandmother. "Tla, little warriors, time to stretch." A magpie on the willow stake cranes its neck, deciding whether to correct your pronunciation. It thinks better of it and flies off, leaving you in charge of this leafy platoon. You reach for the clay scoop balanced on a reed hook. With practiced ease, you dip it into the canal, lift, and let the water arc in a gentle fan across the raised bed. Sunlight refracts through the droplets, flickering like tiny obsidian shards before they kiss the soil. That satisfying hiss when dry earth meets lake water. It's the same sigh you exhale settling into fresh sheets, minus the part where the mattress tries to suck you under. Joke number 1 surfaces. If only you could invoice the maze for its morning spa treatment. Deluxe hydration package, payable in tortilla futures. Mainstream fact slides in beside you. Researchers analysing pollen layers have shown these chinampas consistently yielded higher productivity than dry field plots, largely because canal watering kept soil moisture near perfect even through drought. 7 harvests a year wasn't bragging. It was Tuesday. You breathe that in, feeling a sting of pride, plus a sympathetic twinge in your lower back, since all those harvests need hands and, spoiler alert, yours are attached. You shift to the amaranth row. Here the earth is softer, blended yesterday with that fragrant lake muck you hauled at dawn -1. A passing vendor's canoe clatters lightly against a guide pole. He mutters a sleepy apology, then hawks fresh chiles, because capitalist instincts beat circadian rhythm every time. You raise an eyebrow. Joke number 2 forms. Somewhere in the empire, a motivational speaker is promising 5 reads to financial freedom and selling tickets at 3 cacao beans a seat. Water dribbles over your sandals as you ladle again, careful not to drown the tender shoots. A dragonfly zigzags overhead, its wings humming like papery fans. Quirky tidbit floats up. Certain nights in spring, elders sprinkle powdered moon snail shells onto the canals, claiming the glow attracts beneficial lake spirits who chase off root-gnawing grubs. You never saw the spirits, though the snail's bioluminescence does give the water an eerie shimmer, like jade-coloured starlight pooling at your feet. Whether it works or just looks cool enough for the next empire-wide festival poster, you keep a pouch of shell dust handy for later. Your focus drifts to the maize leaves again. Some display tiny yellowing edges, a hint they crave more lake silt. You file that away for the midday task list. Haul, spread, massage. A light breeze pushes ripples across the canal, and willow shadows dance in complex braille across your skin. Suddenly, you remember the crocodile dung sunscreen story you chuckled about earlier. Turns out, one of your neighbours tried the ancient recipe last festival season. He swore by its SPF, but couldn't convince anyone to stand downwind. Joke number 3. You consider bottling the stuff under a lifestyle brand, Swamp glow, because beauty is in the nostrils of the beholder. Limited market potential, sure, but unbeatable law points. Halfway down the garden, a narrow trench cuts between beds, acting as a miniature aqueduct. You pry a reed plug loose. Canal water floods inward with a soft gurgle, soaking the thirsty squash vines. Engineering moment. Those tiny trenches aren't random ditches. They create a slow-release system feeding roots without manual scooping after the sun climbs too high. Some archaeologists liken them to capillaries, nature's drip irrigation centuries before plastic tubing. You pat the trench wall, satisfied, then replace the plug, sealing the flow like a bartender capping the keg before last call. Dawn's colours intensify, pink, coral, then a vivid gold that paints the lake in molten coin. The maize leaves, slick now, shimmer as if lined with thin bronze. You pause, listening. Distant temple conches wind up their morning chords. Dogs answer. Somewhere a child laughs at an adult joke he doesn't understand. Your own laugh mingles with the breeze. For a moment, time feels less like a stone and more like soft dough stretching under gentle hands. You stoop, gather fallen petals from a night-blooming lily, and scatter them across the water for nothing more than colour therapy. A night heron watches, perhaps judging the wasted snack. Still, the petals float, flashing ivory against ink. It reminds you that these canals double as highways. Later, canoe merchants will glide alongside your chinampa, their hulls piled high with baskets of tunics, cacao nibs, smoked fish, and rumour. For now, though, the silence belongs to you and the plants. Another scoop, another glittering arc. You settle into the rhythm so deeply that the world narrows to water, leaf, breath. In that trance, memory rides a loose strand of thought. Your aunt once claimed the maize can feel whether you're frowning. Water with a scowl and expect shriveled cobs, she warned, lips pursed like wilted epizote. Science remains unconvinced, but you coax a grin anyway. No harm in hedging bets with the vegetable kingdom. A sudden plop nearby, an axolotl, perhaps one of last section's hatchlings, has leaped and landed again, rippling the canal. You resist the urge to lecture it about early morning acrobatics. Instead, you hum that same marketplace tune. The salamander floats, gills fluttering, clearly angling for a cameo in your next lullaby. You oblige with a verse, voice low, letting each syllable stretch like water. You trade the watering scoop for your family's dredging basket, a squat oval of willow ribs patched so many times it rattles like loose teeth. Kneeling at the canal edge, you plunge it deep, hands disappearing into cold silt that hugs your fingers like eager pudding. A swirl of black water billows up, lake perfume, equal parts algae, volcanic clay, and last night's fish gossip wraps around your face. You heave, and the basket surfaces heavy with what Chinampa folk simply call the dragon's breakfast. Water streams through the weave and back to the canal, leaving behind a quivering mound of ink-dark mud shot through with worms and pearly snail shells. With a practiced twist, you flip the load onto the nearest bed. It lands with a gentle splat, more buttery than rude, startling a heron perched on a guide pole. The bird blinks, cocks its head and settles again as if scoring your technique. Mainstream fact arrives on cue. Modern soil analyses show this dredged sediment is naturally fertilized by decomposing lake plants, giving it nitrogen levels that would make a chemical agronomist whistle. Chinampa farmers reused it every few days, building soil depth while the canals stayed navigable. You, however, mostly appreciate that the stuff turns maize stalks into overachievers taller than your uncle's fishing stories. Joke number 1 flutters up while you scoop again. Someday a luxury spa will bottle this black sludge as Mesoamerican mineral mask and charge 3 cacao beans a facial. You promise the maize, you'll remember them when you're rich and exfoliated. The rhythm soon locks in. Dip, lift, drip, splat. Soothing as a lullaby played on water drums. Each new mound you rake gently with an obsidian hoe, blending old earth with fresh nutrients until the surface gleams like marble cake. Mud spatters your calves in abstract patterns. Congratulations, you're now curator of a one-person art gallery called Stains of Ambition. quirky tidbit bubbles up with the smell of damp roots. Some elders insist that crushing roasted chapulines, those nutty little grasshoppers, into the dredged mud sweetens future corn. Always game for culinary experiments, you crumble a handful of crimson powder over a fresh pile. The heron blinks again, perhaps filing a recipe request. The sun climbs, turning mist into silver ribbons. Sweat beads on your brow, instantly freckled by flying grit. Historians still argue whether Chinampa crews took turns on dredge duty or hired specialist mudmen, but in your life the honour rotates according to who loses at after-supper dice. Spoiler, your dice apparently hold a personal grudge. Basket down, basket up. Each lift summons another complaint from your shoulders. Joke number 2 pops. You consider advertising for an intern, but the benefits package reads unlimited mud. And even the neighbourhood teenagers have standards. A flick of motion. A carp leaps beside the boat, disturbed by your excavation. Sunlight flashes on its scales, like someone tossing coins across the water. You grin. Some mornings the mud gift includes a fish or two, dinner wrapped in fertiliser. You whisper thanks to Tlaloc, just in case the rain god is eavesdropping on customer satisfaction surveys. You pause to study the bed's new complexion. Dark, glossy, alive. Using the hoe, you feather the edges, so the mud melts seamlessly into last week's layer. Think of it as spreading chocolate icing, except the cake will sprout beans instead of cavities. Joke number 3 lines up. Bake at sunrise, feeds an empire, 0 calories unless you count the tortillas. A breeze tugs at the willow stakes, releasing a faint peppery scent. Somewhere behind you, a vendor's canoe drifts by. He yawns a greeting and raises a basket of chiles in salute. You nod, mud-splattered like a war hero from the compost campaign, and return to work, while the heron stalks your worm piles with runway poise. Soon the basket feels lighter, canal bottom scraped smooth to a safe depth, and the beds wear a brand new coat of nutrient velvet. You flip the basket upside down to drain, then straighten, vertebrae cracking like popcorn. The ache is real, but so is the quiet pride that floods your chest when you picture maize tassels fat with promise. You paddle the canoe a short distance to the next Chinampa segment, letting cool water lap at sore knuckles. In the brief glide, you recall a grandmother's warning. The lake is a drowsy serpent, and these mud offerings keep it dreaming peacefully. Neglect the ritual and it might thrash, swallowing gardens whole. Hydrological wisdom or bedtime thriller. Either way, you never skip a dredge day. Back on land, you test the mud with your heel, springy, not soupy, and imagine rootlets already reaching for the mineral feast. Somewhere underfoot, an axolotl patrol stirs the silt. Curious about the sudden cloudburst of nutrients, you hum them a bar of yesterday's tune. Maybe regenerative salamanders appreciate musical fertilizer too. Before you move on, you rinse the hoe in the canal, watching dark swirls merge with clear water until the streaks fade like memories nobody bothered chiseling onto stone. A squadron of mosquitoes seizes the opportunity for brunch on your forearms, but you retaliate with a muddy slap, leaving yourself decorated like a lopsided jaguar. The irony isn't lost. You feed millions of plant mouths while a few six-legged freeloaders file teeth marks on you. You mutter about forming a human mosquito labor union, benefits negotiable, blood donations strictly voluntary. Tasks line up like impatient market customers. Seedlings await, reed walls need mending, and you still owe yourself a mid-morning gulp of spicy cacao. Yet for this sliver of time, you allow the lake to hush you. Knees still humming from the dredging workout, you steer the canoe to the seed raft, a flat reed platform bobbing in the shade of overhanging willow branches. There, rows of tiny seedlings wait like nervous students on the first day of school, cotyledons trembling in the breeze. You squat, shake the pins and needles from your calves, and offer the plants your best motivational grin. Joke number 1 drifts across your mind. If plants earned report cards, half these babies would ace photosynthesis 101, and the rest would blame the axolotls for eating their homework. You slide a woven cradle under a tray of tomato seedlings, each no taller than your smallest finger. Their leaves smell faintly of green pepper and hopeful salsa. Mainstream fact lands softly. Chinampa farmers introduce seedlings rather than direct seeds because the lake's constant humidity favored mold. Transplanting at this semi-grown stage gave crops a survival edge sharper than an obsidian blade. You whisper, Tlazo Kamati, thank you, to the ancestor who figured that out. Your current mildew-free lifestyle appreciates them. Balancing the cradle, you step onto the garden bed, mud still springy from the dragon's breakfast you served earlier. Each footfall sinks just enough to remind you that technically you're strolling on an agricultural waterbed. The thought cues joke number 2. Imagine selling floating garden mattresses, guaranteed to rock you gently but may sprout squash by morning. Infomercial at 8. You kneel, scoop a divot with your fingers, and settle the first tomato into place. Elders insist the seedling must hear a blessing as it meets the mud, so you recite in a lilting whisper, grow stout, bear fruit, and taste better than the neighbour's crop. A light chuckle accompanies the final line. Humour, they say, is premium fertilizer. Beside you, a bee pauses on a maize tassel, perhaps judging your comedic timing. A slender pouch on your belt holds treasures more mystical than cacao beans. Turquoise chips, obsidian shavings, a single bright quetzal feather no longer than a fingernail. Quirky tidbit incoming. Some families tie a tiny bead to the base of every 10th plant, believing hungry weevils get distracted by shiny things and wander off like toddlers in a pottery market. You thread a bead onto a hair-fine fibre and loop it around one tomatal stem. It glints sky blue against green, a miniature amulet that says, "No snacking zone." Plant after plant slips into the loamy surface. The rhythm becomes meditative. Dig, nestle, press, bless. You hum that axolotl lullaby again. Apparently, you've written its chorus into Chinampa lore, and the seedlings seem to wiggle approvingly. From the canal, water laps at the reed wall you patched last season with Swamp Glow approved mud, still holding. The sun lifts higher, warming the back of your neck. You smear a fresh swipe of lake clay sunscreen, recalling crocodile dung SPF with a theatrical shudder. Seedlings now stretch in tidy rows, each one anchored, blessed, and accessorized. A faint dragonfly buzz passes your ear, followed by the satisfied croak of a canal frog, possibly applauding your plant placement. You decide to take it as applause anyway. The frog's opinion on row spacing may be groundbreaking, and you are nothing if not polite to future Nobel laureates. Work shifts next to chili seedlings, spicy sparks destined for tomorrow's market stews. As you dig their homes, you remember your grandmother's superstition. Whistle a rising scale for chilies so their pods point skyward. Easy to harvest. You purse lips, whistle a jaunty scale, and a passing magpie issues a snarky counter-melody. The duel ends in your favour. Magpie retreats, and you plant the chilies victoriously upright. Mid-row, you pause to flex numb fingers. A neighbouring gardener floats past, piling marigolds for the Lake Goddess Festival previewed by distant drums in yesterday's twilight. He waves, tips his straw hat, and calls, "Good seedlings make good dreams." You salute with a bead-threaded tomato. Both of you laugh at the nonsense logic, but keep it anyway. Dreams, like gardens, flourish in fertile nonsense. While tucking bean tendrils beside a squash sprout, you notice a peculiar pattern. 3 seedlings bear leaves tinged pale gold at the edges. Nutrient shortage? Maybe those roasted chapaline crumbs weren't evenly sprinkled. You vow to revisit with extra mud seasoned grasshopper style. Culinary science marches on. By late morning, the bed resembles a green quilt, squares stitched with living thread. You scoop canal water into cupped palms and drizzle over the newest transplants, murmuring, "Settle in, little dynamos. The sun's tough, but the mud is generous." Droplets sparkle, then vanish into soil, a disappearing act that feels vaguely magical. You sit back on heels, letting blood return to tingling toes. In the hush, the garden's pulse emerges, maize leaves clicking, young chilies vibrating faintly under insect wings. water chuckling against reeds, your own heartbeat sinking to an ancient metronome. Somehow all the superstitions, beads, whistles, blessings, blur into one certainty. Care given is care returned, though the registry office for plant gratitude is famously slow with receipts. A cloud slides over the sun, gifting brief shade. You lean into it, gaze across the canal where yesterday's mud gleams and tomorrow's flowers already hint at colour. The heron from earlier stalks between willow roots, worm now processed into heron ambitions. You salute the bird, co-worker, rival, audience, and rise carefully, brushing soil off knees. Seedlings done, you gather empty trays, light as promise, and the canoe noses through a glitter-splashed canal, your paddle slicing lazy chevrons that widen and dissolve before anyone can claim them as art. Hunger announces itself with the subtlety of a temple drum, so you aim for the communal seed raft now repurposed into a floating breakfast nook. The platform shivers underfoot as you climb aboard, its reed bundles creaking like polite dinner guests shifting chairs. Mid-lake sunlight scatters dapples across the water, painting everything in a soft gold that even the mosquitoes pause to admire. Just long enough for you to swap them into early retirement. A neighbour glides up in his own canoe, propping against the raft with a gentle thunk. He carries a clay comal warm from embers and piled with tlacoyos, thick masa pockets stuffed with black beans dotted with fresh cheese and fragrant with epazote. Steam curls upward, smelling of hearth fires and revolutionary carbohydrates. Joke number 1 slips out. You declare these tlacoyos the true eighth wonder, edging out the late goddess's misty Excel sheet by a narrow margin. Your neighbour snorts, offers the first piece, then counters that tlacoyos ranked 9th, right behind my mother-in-law's ability to find chores at midnight. You drop cross-legged onto the reed mat, the surface springy, vaguely mattress-like. Remember that hypothetical floating garden bed you mused about? Congratulations, you're beta testing it with breakfast crumbs. A clay mug of chocolatl, frothy cacao frothed with a carved stick, materializes from your neighbour's basket. The drink smells sharp and bitter, with a top note of chili that promises to wake every ancestral spirit napping in your bloodstream. Mainstream fact wafts in with the aroma. Chroniclers describe morning markets in Tenochtitlan offering thousands of tlacoyo variants, from rabbit-filled luxuries to humble bean standards like the one warming your palm. Those same accounts note that paddling merchants linked the chinampas to the city's appetite in a supply chain smoother than a freshly planed canoe plank. You chew slowly, tasting history along with masa and salt. The raft wobbles as a third canoe hooks on, this one paddled by an elderly woman whose laugh arrives before she does. She sets jars of honeyed amaranth and, without invitation, regales both of you with last night's dream where maize cobs burst into song and demanded equal festival billing with the marigolds. Joke number 2 nearly chokes you mid-sip. You picture a corn chorus line kicking tassels in perfect rhythm, stage lights bouncing off kernels like golden sequins. You drizzle the amaranth over your second tlacoyo, grains glinting like spilled constellations. Between bites, conversation becomes a lazy paddle of its own. Talk drifts from weather omens, clouds shaped like jaguars mean afternoon showers, to gossip about a distant cousin who tried that infamous crocodile dung sunscreen and still can't get dinner invites. A gentle ripple rocks the raft as a pair of axolotls surface, their perma-smiles glowing in sunlit water. You toss a tiny crumb. They nip, then linger, as if savouring lakeside cafe vibes. Their presence triggers a memory of the bead you hung on a tomato stem. Flashy jewellery apparently appeals to amphibians too. Historians still argue whether axolotls were deliberately stocked as protein reserves or simply thrived by accident in the canal microclimate. Right now, they're content to audition for house mascots, and you're equally content to grant them the role. Your neighbour pulls out a flute carved from river cane and plays a meandering tune, notes skipping across the lake like flat stones. The melody threads through reed walls, coaxing dragonflies into an aerial ballet. You keep rhythm by tapping the comal rim. The elderly woman hums harmony between spoonfuls of honey amaranth. Joke number 3 writes itself. You suggest forming a breakfast band, the floating fandangos, with merchandise payable in tlacoyos. Potential hit single, Massa in the Morning. Mid-tune, a shadow passes overhead, great egret flapping slow wing beats, mirrored perfectly on the water's glossy surface. You tilt your head back, washing the final sip of chocolatl down your throat, warmth spreading from belly to fingertips. The raft sways, heartbeat slow, matching the late's pulse. The smell of episode lingers like a bookmark in your nose, promising future bites. A lull falls, companionable, knitted from shared sunlight and satisfied stomachs. Reed mats hush beneath your weight. A distant conch blows from the city, marking second daylight hour. You wipe massa crumbs onto your trouser leg, instant snack for the next ant patrol, and lean elbows on knees, eyes half closed. The gentle sarcasm you carry like a toolkit softens in the golden wash. The garden chores, waiting on shore with folded arms, feel momentarily less insistent. Conversation drifts to the upcoming Lake Goddess Festival. The elderly woman describes her marigold garlands, 2 arm spans long, brighter than sunrise. Your neighbour brags about a reed lantern shaped like a water lily that glows with coals and crushed firefly paste. You playfully vow to craft a papier-mâché axolotl float, complete with bead necklaces and a sign reading, "Regen like you mean it." Laughter splashes across the water, scattering a school of tiny fish. Another tlacoyo? Tempting, but the belly protests. You fold the kamal's woven cover, thank your companions, and trade leftovers. Marigold petals for extra beans, chili for flute music IOUs, commerce done the old way, with generosity as currency, and jokes for small change. The elderly woman paddles off first, reed paddle dipping like a metronome. Your neighbour lingers, wiping komal soot with a corn husk. The paddle kisses the water in an easy rhythm as you guide the canoe back to your chinampa. Belly full, mind limber, and sarcasm topped up like a clay mug of chocolatl. Halfway across the canal, you notice faint ripples fanning toward you, convoy approaching. 3 trading canoes appear through sun glare, hulls painted with swirling turquoise glyphs that proclaim, in less than subtle shorthand, "We bring the good stuff." You recognize the lead merchant by his feathered straw hat, a flamboyant homage to some bird that definitely did not sign the endorsement contract. He raises a palm in greeting, steering alongside until your crafts drift side by side like amiable alligators. His canoe is stacked with woven hampers of cacao beans, obsidian blades gleaming in neat rows, and a single basket of chili pepper garlands that look mischievously fire-ready. You flash a grin, and joke number 1 slides out. "Careful, friend, those chilies burn hotter than my last attempt at love poetry." He cackles, nearly upending a jar of bee honey. Merchant humour is an underrated spice. You throw a braided reed rope to tether the boats, then hop onto your garden bed, motioning for the convoy to nose against a willow post. The chinampa absorbs their weight with a sigh, like a couch reluctantly hosting more guests than cushions. Your seedlings rustle, eager audience to the morning's commerce. Mainstream fact steps onto the stage. Imperial records describe thousands of these mercado canoes crisscrossing Xochimilco daily, delivering obsidian from distant quarries and cacao traded up from the warmer Gulf, feeding both artisans' workshops and citizens' sweet teeth. Logistics that would make a modern supply chain guru clutch their clipboard in admiration. You and Feather Hat Merchant exchange the traditional 3-tap handshake, palm, wrist, elbow, then begin the cheerful ballet of bartering. He eyes your fresh chili seedlings, their leaves still twinkling with dew, and haggles for 10 in exchange for a pouch of mid-grade obsidian arrowheads. You lift an eyebrow, theatrically inspecting a blade edge thin as dragonfly wings. Joke number 2. Sharp enough to slice a mosquito mid-buzz. Do you sell a quiet warranty for sleepless nights? Laughter choruses from the other canoes as arrowheads clink in agreement. As negotiations roll on, histograms of value swirl in your brain. 2 baskets of cacao for 3 bundles of maize tassel dolls your youngest cousins wove, plus a side deal, 1 polished obsidian shaving mirror for access to tomorrow's festival lantern lighting platform. Historians still argue whether cacao functioned more as currency or confection, but here and now it's definitely both. Those mottled beans clang softly in your palm like stone marbles with a caffeine secret. Featherhat waves another merchant forward, this one with tiny clay figurines, jaguars, hummingbirds, and a questionable crocodile that resembles a cucumber with fangs. The trade continues. You hand over bunches of freshly cut marigolds destined for city altars. In return, you secure a small sack of vanilla pods and 2 gourds of fine sea salt. You toss the salt in the air like confetti, letting crystals flash in the sun before catching them again. Showmanship counts. Merchant eyes widen. They counter with a single jade bead. That bead, the size of a hummingbird egg, could pay 3 months' temple fees. But you play it cool and request seasonal credit on weaving fibre instead. Barter is theatre as much as math. Applause rustles through maize leaves. Between deals, you pass around a gourd of leftover chocolatl, the chilly kick jolting yawns out of even the sternest traders. A younger paddler, cheeks smudged with soot, tries his first sip and practically levitates, eyes wide, hair probably singing a hymn to the sunrise. You slap his shoulder in comradeship, telling him the real secret is whisking longer than you think necessary. He vows to practice. Maybe start a microbrew canal stand. Star Machuel, anyone? There's your callback, and it scores a boat-wide chuckle. A gust rattles reed walls, and your chinampa shifts. Seedlings nod as though endorsing every trade. Featherhat hauls out the final surprise. A roll of woven cotton dyed brilliant cochineal red, the colour of royal mantles at festival parades. He wants maize, lots of maize. You calculate recent harvest predictions, remembering that nutrient-rich dredging you performed earlier. Yields look promising. After dramatic pause, you agree, sealing the deal with a crunchy handshake over chili garlands that leave fingertips pleasantly aflame. Merchants secure their new goods, trays of seedlings, garlands, 2 reed lanterns, and the promise of your maize haul come next moon. You untie the rope, but before they push off, you sprinkle a pinch of the new singing sand across your canoe bow. It murmurs, a tone like distant flute echo, and the traders grin. One gives a theatrical bow, hat feathers bobbing. As the convoy paddles away, hulls weighted by fresh produce and inflated storytelling rights, you lean on your paddle, heart thudding a happy barter rhythm. Sun sits high now, glazing the water in a sheet of hammered bronze. You breathe deep. Cacao, chili, obsidian, vanilla, salt, singing sand, and an IOU for maize. Ingredients for feasts, festivals, and perhaps an ill-advised stand-up routine. The chinampa feels richer, not only in cargo but in stories. Merchant laughter lingers like incense, and you imagine tonight's city market buzzing with tales of bead-wearing tomatoes, sunscreen that bites back, and a sarcastic gardener who bargains like a trickster god on Casual Friday. You dip your paddle, stirring jewel-bright reflections. Tasks beckon, reed walls need patching before afternoon showers threaten, and those chilly seedlings crave a last shade cloth. But you allow a brief pause, letting the lake cradle the canoe, while obsidian blades clink like lazy wind chimes at your feet. You nose the canoe against the chinampa's eastern flank, where the reed walls slump like tired shoulders after a bad posture seminar. Rain clouds already huddle on the horizon, the summer monsoon rehearsing its entrance with distant thunderclaps that sound suspiciously like someone rolling cacao grinders across obsidian tiles. You hop ashore, splash into ankle-deep mud, and inspect the damage. Willow stakes leaning at tipsy angles, reed bundles unraveling, tiny gaps wide enough for a curious axolotl to squeeze through and file an eviction notice. Time for reedcraft, equal parts carpentry, embroidery, and last-minute panic. First tool out is your obsidian-bladed chisel, traded just hours ago. Its edge flashes green as hummingbird feathers. You cut fresh tool reeds piled on the bank, long spongy stems smelling of cucumber and new rain. Mainstream fact slides into place. These reeds, Xenoplectus acutus to modern botanists, once blanketed valley shallows so thickly that imperial engineers harvested millions each year for mats, sandals, and, most crucially, the flexible retaining walls that keep floating gardens from drifting off like picnic blankets in a breeze. You strip leaves with quick swipes, bundle stems, and lash them to upright willow poles using magui fibre twine. Every knot gets an extra tug. You remember the elders' warning that soggy knots slip faster than political promises. Joke number 1 bubbles up. You mutter, double knot security. The only Empire upgrade that doesn't require priestly paperwork. A dragonfly buzzes approval, or perhaps it's laughing at your DIY commentary. Beneath your feet, water slops against the wall, probing for weak spots. You jam a wedge of singing sand into one gap. The grains emit their peculiar flute whisper, filling the humid air with an accidental soundtrack. Quirky tidbit unlocks. Some builders claim the sand's resonance scares off muskrats that would otherwise gnaw the reeds. Does it work? Scientific jury is out, but your inner showman likes the ambience. Moving down the length, you find a section where last season's repair, courtesy of your sleepy cousin, consists of 3 reeds tied with what looks alarmingly like hair ribbon. You raise an eyebrow and fetch sturdier replacements, promising the wall a proper makeover. Historians still argue whether Chinampa upkeep followed communal duty schedules or relied on each family's initiative. Judging from the ribbon fiasco, both systems probably coexisted with occasional flashes of decorative flair. You lay new bundles, overlapping them like roof shingles, so rainwater sheets off instead of tunneling through. Each bundle gets a smear of lake clay mixed with pulverized duckweed, the Chinampa equivalent of waterproof mortar. The clay squelches between fingers, cool as aloe, and a fond callback flashes. The same mud doubles as your mineral-rich face mask, infinitely preferable to crocodile dung SPF. Thunder rumbles closer, and a gust lifts maize leaves inland, their tassels waving frantic semaphore. Hurry! You tighten lashing, then drive fresh stakes with a mallet cut from a stout camphor branch years ago. The rhythmic thud reverberates through soil, past root and worm and hidden stone, into water where startled minnows dart like silver dashes of punctuation. A neighbour's voice floats over the canal, teasing, "Bet those walls sag harder than your festival lantern dance." You fire back that at least your reed work won't set itself ablaze on opening night. Laughter ripples across water, camaraderie sealed by shared dread of the coming storm. You trade quick advice. He recommends daubing the seams with melted beeswax. You counter with a sprinkle of chapuline dust for pest deterrence. Future historians might categorize such exchanges as microsymposia, but today they're just garden gossip over a muddy fence. You test each segment with a shoulder shove. The wall holds firm, sending a trickle of displaced water over your sandals. Satisfied, you erect a small lean-to of reed mats overhead to keep tools dry. As you work beneath it, raindrops begin to patter. First inquisitive taps, then confident drumming. The canopy amplifies each drop into a soft timpani, soothing despite urgency. Lightning flares revealing the Chinampa in stark chiaroscuro. Maize plumes backlit like fireworks, chili seedlings crouched low, willow leaves flashing silver. You quick-stitch the final bundle, knot, and smear clay sealant across any visible seam. The singing sand murmurs approval, a soft E-flat tremolo, while you plant your hands on hips, rainwater coursing down arms, and survey the reinforced battlements. Cloudburst hits full force now, and the canal swells, slapping at the fresh construction. But the wall stands rigid, reeds flexing like sinewy muscles rather than brittle bones. You breathe relief, mingled with petrichor, the rich scent that rises when rain strikes thirsty soil. Some say it's a bacterial perfume, others a secret love letter from earth to sky. Either way, it's intoxicating. You retreat beneath the lean-to, pulling a palm-sized gourd from your pouch, the last of this morning's chocolatl, chilled by breeze. You sip, savor the spicy edge, and watch water bead then slide down reed surfaces, exactly as design intends. Thunder rolls applause. In the brief lull, you notice an axolotl nosing around the reconstructed gap, gills flaring like tiny red fans. It wiggles through the singing sand, perhaps testing acoustics, then darts away into brown water. You chuckle. Unofficial building inspector, now satisfied. Finally, you gather tools into a reed basket, chisel, mallet, coils of twine still warm from your grip. The rain's tempo softens, moving east with a sigh, leaving diamond droplets strung on maize leaves, like festival garlands rehearsing their sparkle. Mud sucks at your sandals as the storm drifts off muttering, and the lake regains its glass-smooth composure, as though someone ironed out every wrinkle with a sunbeam. You ease the canoe along a narrow side canal where willow roots braid into shady catacombs, the favourite haunt of your unofficial mascot brigade, axolotls. Tiny wakes fan out ahead as the pale pink salamanders rise, gills fluttering like lace collars at an aquatic garden party. You rest the paddle, lean over the gunwale and greet them in your best croon, a low rolling melody patterned after yesterday's flute tune, because nothing says VIP lounge like live music on demand. You lift a small hikara scoop, sprinkle crushed marigold petals over the water, and watch the petals spin like golden record sleeves. Joke number 1 cracks open. Limited edition vinyl, plays only lake hits, dampens every complaint from noisy neighbours. An axolotl snaps at a drifting petal, misses, and pirouettes with comic indignation, earning appreciative applause from the willow leaves overhead. Settling on the gunwale, you hum a new verse, soft rise, slow fall, letting each note dangle over still water. Sound scatters ripples of sunlight. Salamanders drift closer until their snouts nearly touch the canoe. One nudges your fingertip, skin cool and slick as fresh aloe. You muse aloud about their party trick. Lose a limb today, regrow tomorrow. No paperwork required. Regeneration so flawless that even nerves rethread like expert weavers. Historians still argue whether physicians in Tenochtitlan attempted to study that ability or chalked it up to divine whim. But modern labs would pay an obsidian king's ransom for a tutorial. Thunder rumbles again, distant encore, but here the air is syrup still. Your voice echoes under low willow arches, amplifying into a pocket of perfect acoustics. You realise you've stumbled into a natural amphitheatre, complete with amphibian fans. Joke number 2 surfaces. Meech, you promise front row season passes, in exchange for them keeping mosquitoes off your ankles. A salamander, call it maestro, floats belly up, gills flaring, either in acceptance or mid-nap. You're choosing optimism. To deepen the set list, you experiment with a rhythmic beat, palms slapping the canoe rim, fist tapping the side, foot splashing light kicks, percussion that sends silverfish darting like confetti. Quirky tidbit number 2 emerges mid-jam. Local superstition claims each axolotl harbours a fragment of solotl, the dog-headed god who fled transformation duties and dove into these waters. Sings sweetly, and he might reveal lost paths through the underworld, handy perhaps when corn prices crash. You glance at Maestro, wondering if a secret map hides behind those unblinking eyes. Between verses, you scoop floating debris from the canal, withered reed scraps, a stray chili leaf, tidying the stage for your scaly audience. It dawns on you that the very act of singing keeps sunlight slants through willow curtains, painting axolotls in glimmering stripes, living candies in rose gold and ghost white. You study a juvenile's translucent skin, internal organs visible like tiny lanterns in a paper house. Awe hushes your voice. Instead, you whistle soft, descending tones, letting the moment stretch. Water hush, leaf rustle, salamander gill flutter. An orchestra minimal yet complete. To close the impromptu concert, you sprinkle a final pinch of singing sand from your pocket into the shallows. The grains hiss a faint chord, eerie yet gentle, harmonizing with the lingering whistle. The axolotls pivot, fascinated, circling the sand cloud as if reading vibrations with their skin. You bow, proper stage etiquette, then straighten, joints cracking louder than applause. Paddle reclaimed, you push off slowly so as not to swamp your fans. Canoe glides backward. Maestro follows a meter, then turns, tail swishing goodbye. You promise to return with a new set list, perhaps a ballad about reed walls that stand firm against gossiping rain clouds. As you angle toward open canal, reflection reels beside you. A gardener afloat in midday glow, singing to water dragons and swapping jokes with the breeze. A contented sigh escapes. Rain repaired walls, seedlings thrive, barters bolstered supplies, and now even axolotls got their serenade. The Chinampa world feels less like labour, more like a recurring dream where every task hums in key. Ahead, Maize tassels shimmer, calling you back to practicalities. Festival garlands need weaving, chilly seedlings crave afternoon shade, and there's a rumour the floating fandangos have their first twilight gig on the breakfast raft. You dip the paddle, sending concentric rings across the water, each ripple a silent encore request, answered by distant frog croaks. Morning storms, merchant laughter, and reed wall symphonies merge into one gentle cadence as you paddle home. And somewhere behind, beneath willows whispering secrets only salamanders fully grasp, Maestro hums his own bubble song, clipping the melody of your goodbye into an endless echo under the lake's green skin. You dock at the Chinampa's western edge just as the sun tilts past midday, throwing long spears of light across the rippling canals. The earlier rain has rinsed every leaf to a lacquered shine. Maize blades glitter, and the chilly seedlings stand taller, as if starch pressed by the storm itself. A muffled boom drifts over the lake. Practice drums from Tenochtitlan's festival square, reminding you that tomorrow morning Ayusiawatl's celebration will ignite these waters in colour, scent, and spirited bargaining, louder than a peddler's guilt trip. First order of business: marigolds. You slide a bamboo sickle through beds where orange blooms crowd like daylight distilled into petals. Each swipe releases that spicy, sweet aroma, part tangerine, part warm straw, that clings to hair and clothes, ensuring anyone within sniffing distance knows you moonlight as a one-person sunrise. You bind stalks into bundles with maguey fibre, pausing now and then to flick petals at nosy dragonflies. Joke number 1 flutters out. Whoever invented confetti clearly copied the Chinampa, but charged extra for the no-scent version. Mainstream fact strolls in. Marigold bright. These flowers, Kempo-Alcockchitl, were so integral to imperial rituals that gardeners paid tax in blossom weight, ferrying thousands of garlands to temples each month. Priests traced them into watery labyrinths at dawn, petals floating like miniature solar barges guiding spirits home. You imagine the lake tomorrow, a molten carpet, petals swirling around canoes like fragrant whirlpools. Petals gathered, you thread them onto palm fibre twine. The rhythm, pierce, slide, knot, beats in time with distant drums. Your fingers move fast. Each garland must span 2 paddles' length to loop neatly around festival altars. Halfway through, you break for a sip of lake-chilled water laced with a hint of mint. A neighbour's canoe drifts up bearing baskets of copal resin and reed torches, festival staples. He jokes that your flower stash could bribe a minor deity into personal lawn service. You reply that any deity worth their salt should already own head shears. Joke number 2, punctuated by shared laughter echoing over sunlit water. You barter a small garland for 3 sticks of fragrant copal, the resin's piney tang promising tomorrow's incense clouds. Quirky tidbit paddles in. Some families secretly tuck a cacao bean inside their largest marigold to wake the goddess's sweet tooth and secure good harvests. You slip a bean into the fattest bloom, sealing the bribe with an exaggerated wink at the sky. If Ayusiawatl monitors such antics, let her savour the joke along with the cocoa. Next task, reed lanterns. You haul yesterday's woven frames from a shaded nook, each shaped like a water lily with petals curling outward. Using a paste of water-softened maize starch, you adhere slivers of cured fish bladder, nature's parchment, over the gaps. Drums crescendo in the distance, signalling rehearsal break. A perfect cue for a quick inventory. Marigold garlands, coiled and fragrant. Lanterns, 10, glowing like captured sunsets. Copal sticks, nestled in a reed basket. Singing sand, still humming quietly in your pouch, eager to sprinkle harmonics around the goddess's bamboo effigy. You add a final garnish, weaving stray maize husks into small twisting spirals to hang from canoe prows, wind toys that hiss softly as they spin, rumoured to lure beneficial rain sprites. The sun inches west, gilding everything in a mellow brass. You carry the festival supplies to the canoe, stacking garlands across the gunnels in cascading loops. As you work, memories surface. Last year's festival, when a playful gust launched your lantern skyward, spooking 3 herons into spectacular mid-air collisions. The crowd loved it, called it the goddess's fireworks. This year, you secure lantern cords with knots stricter than imperial tax law. For a moment, you pause at the water's edge, letting petals drift from your sleeve into the canal. They float away, tiny orange ships bound for tomorrow's flotilla. You imagine dawn, drums rolling, conch shells bellowing, hundreds of canoes gliding in choreographed spirals, while garlands arc overhead like bridges of living flame. Somewhere in that swirl you'll paddle, singing sand at the ready, bead-decked tomatoes riding proudly in baskets. The thought swells inside you like drumskin, equal parts nervous thrill and sleepy joy. A breeze tugs your ponytail, willow branches rustle applause. You bow theatrically to your invisible audience, part axolotl choir, part approving ancestors. Then you slide into the canoe, its hull low under the weight of blooms and lanterns, but balanced, eager. Paddle dips, canal ripples, and chinampa retreats behind a curtain of golden marigold scent. On the slow glide homeward, you rehearse tomorrow's opening hymn under your breath, adjusting rhythm to the paddle's splash. Night herons stir in reeds, their necks craning, perhaps auditioning backup vocals. You invite them with a whistle. They decline with dignified silence, haughty artists. As twilight breathes lilac across the sky, you dock at your home landing. Family members wave from the porch mat, eyes reflecting lantern glows. They help unload garlands, threading them over door frames until the hut looks like a portable sunrise parked by the water. You stash copal near the hearth, set lanterns to dry, and hang reed wind toys where the evening breeze can test their hiss. Festival Eve has officially begun, wrapping the household in citrus floral perfume and anticipatory heartbeat. With chores ticked off, you sit cross-legged on the landing plank, legs dangling above moonlit water. Reflection pools beneath. The gardener who sang to axolotls, traded barbs with merchants, patched. The sun parks itself dead center in the sky, a molten shield radiating through damp air and turning every surface. Water, willow leaf, even your reed hat, into a makeshift mirror. You plant your paddle upright in the mud, call it a flag of victory, and wipe a forearm across your brow. Morning chores, festival prep, and a polite argument with thunderclouds all behind you. It's finally harvest time, the quiet noon departure that ties the bow on the day. You start with the maize. Cobs hang plump and obliging, husks crisp from the storm wash. One twist, a downward snap, and they drop into your carry basket with reassuring thuds. Each sound the Chinampa's version of a cash register ka-ching. Mainstream fact strolls along. Colonial scribes later recorded that a single Chinampa could yield up to 7 maize harvests a year, a statistic that still makes modern agronomists spit out their coffee. You wonder if they also noted the number of mosquito bites per farmer, a metric surely deserving footnotes. A swirl of marigold confetti still lingers in the air, refusing to respect gravity. You pluck stray petals off your shoulder, tuck them behind an ear for style points, and reach for the chilies. They glow lacquer red, promising culinary fireworks. Joke number 1 pops. You imagine bottling lake water steeped with these chilies and selling it as Aztec energy drink, flavor, existential spice. 2 axolotls surface beside the bed like skeptical focus group participants, then sink away without comment. Next come tomatoes, beans, and a handful of experimental squash blossoms your aunt swears will take the city by storm once she figures out how to deep fry them without starting a temple fire. You load everything into the canoe until it resembles a floating produce aisle, the aroma of green life thick as fresh tortilla steam. Quirky tidbit surfaces. Certain Chinampa families knot a single strand of woman's hair around the first cob harvested each midday. Supposedly it keeps field mice from finding the stash. Supposedly it also started because one busy gardener forgot ribbon. You don't question it. Tradition plus inadvertent fashion statement equals win-win. Paddle in hand you push off, canoe easing free from mud with a soft schlup, like the lake smacking its lips in farewell. Water cradles the hull, and a hush falls, broken only by the creak of reed ties and the distant caw of a restless heron, still offended by your earlier DIY walls. Maize tassels sway in the bow's breeze, as if offering a slow-motion standing ovation. Halfway down the canal, you pause to adjust the reed shade screen over your chili baskets. The noon sun could blister their skin faster than crocodile dung sunscreen. Ruins a first date. Joke number 2 glints. Maybe you should market the shade screen as pre-activated solar discretion, guaranteed to keep chilies modest and gardeners slightly less crispy. The paddle dips again, sending ripples across a mirrored sky that now floats beneath you. Somewhere out on the main waterway, festival drums recommence, deep and steady, practicing tomorrow's heartbeat. Each thump echoes through the canal walls, and you time your strokes accordingly. Thumb, dip, thumb, pull. The rhythm eases muscles wound tight from reedcraft and harvest heft, letting shoulders loosen like knots soaking in warm water. You glide by a willow that leans so far its leaves tickle the canal's surface. From a branch hangs a tiny reed charm your cousin placed moons ago. 2 crossed paddles, signifying safe journeys. You tip your hat to it, accepting its silent blessing. Historians still argue whether such talismans served practical navigation roles or purely sentimental ones, but you know firsthand that sentiment often steers the paddle straighter than any landmark. A sudden splash. Maestro the axolotl launches from the shallows, does a brief backflip, show off, and slips away, trailing a swirl of bubble applause. You laugh, holding up a tomato like a red balloon in salute. Joke number 3. You promise front row seats at tonight's rehearsal for your fledgling band as long as Maestro brings his own snacks, preferably mosquitoes by the mouthful. As you near home dock, lake water shifts from sun bronze to cool indigo, where afternoon shadows pool beneath stilted houses. You pass under a bamboo footbridge where children lean over railings, counting garlands and shouting guesses at tomorrow's petal weight. One kid wagers you'll set a record, another bets your lanterns will outrun the wind again. You raise the paddle in salute, dripping sun-flecked water, and award them both honorary floating fandango memberships. Dock planks nudge the canoe. You tie a quick figure-8 knot, unload baskets onto the platform, and let the resident turkeys inspect the hall. They cluck approval, particularly at the beans, protein dreams dancing in beady eyes. Family appears, forming a bucket brigade to shuttle produce to the cool granary hut, where smoked clay walls breathe damp whispers that keep vegetables crisp. Before stepping ashore, you sit a moment longer in the emptying canoe. The hull floats lighter now, rocking gently, sighing as if relieved its belly is no longer a travelling farm. You trail fingers through water warm as chamomile tea, and watch petals pass under the bridge, swirling toward tomorrow's festival stage. The day's remains list themselves in your thoughts. Secure lantern wicks, tune reed flute for the dawn procession, maybe scribble a new joke about obsidian mirrors and selfie culture, future-proof that your sarcasm can time travel. But for now, midday sunlight glows gold on the water. The chinampa hums behind you like a low-tuned harp, and everything feels exactly balanced, like produce piled to the brim yet never tipping the canoe. You inhale the fragrance of copal smoke, beginning to curl from a neighbour's cookfire, and let your shoulders sink. Let the paddle rest now, its wooden blade silent against the boat's worn side. Feel the lake smooth itself beneath you, surface settling into gentle breaths that rock the water like a cradle. The sun lowers a fraction, trading bright heat for warm glow, and everything slows with it. Willow leaves drift in languid spirals, dragonflies hover without hurry, the distant drums soften into a far-off heartbeat you can barely hear. Draw in a slow breath, tasting the faint sweetness of marigold on the breeze, and let your shoulders release their final knots. Picture the chinampa behind you, rows of maize blurring into sleepy green as twilight eases across the beds. The walls you repaired stand firm, reeds darkening to cool olive, water beading and slipping away in silvery threads. They need nothing from you now. Under the bridge, petals still wander, bright dots drifting wherever the current decides. Let your thoughts drift the same way, untethered and unhurried, following those tiny boats of colour toward the horizon. Each petal carries a worry. Release one, then another, until only quiet remains. Imagine Maestro and his axolotl choir settling into silt-soft burrows, gills fanning slow, letting the lake sing them toward dreams. Overhead, clouds stretch thin and pale, brushed peach and lilac by the dipping sun. A heron lifts into the sunset, wings steady, carving a single graceful line across the sky before folding into reeds for the night. Feel your breath lengthen, like ripples widening until they fade. Muscles loosen, eyelids grow pleasantly heavy. The lake, the garden, the festival preparations, all will wait. For now, surrender to the hush, to the gentle rocking of invisible waves, and let the quiet carry you, where dreams sprout as softly as seedlings in moon-kissed mud. Good night, traveller of floating garden. The wind slams the monastery door behind you as you step into the scriptorium. It's a low, smoky room with a rush-strewn floor and a long wooden table groaning under the weight of half-finished manuscripts, sharpened goose-feather quills, and a disturbing amount of fish oil. Around you, silent figures hunch under thick hoods, hunched like gargoyles over their work. One of them nods at you briefly, then dips his quill into ink the colour of raven feathers. You move closer and see the illuminated capital of a new gospel beginning to take shape. The bee in Beatus Vir is the size of a cat, filled with intricate knotwork and the head of what might be a lion, or maybe a sheep. Hard to say. The artist clearly had a limited animal reference pool. It's the early 9th century, and this place, let's call it somewhere extremely damp in County Kerry, is one of dozens of monastic centres across Ireland that are quietly keeping the written word alive, while most of Europe is still shaking off the fall of Rome. These monks aren't just preserving sacred texts, they're also collecting classical knowledge, compiling herbals, charting the stars, and translating psalms into Old Irish, so the locals can mumble them more intelligibly during Mass. But all of that comes second to one thing: writing. Writing is sacred here. Every letter, every page, every breathless, ink-stained sigh that escapes a scribe's lips is a prayer, and sometimes those prayers are very tired, occasionally passive-aggressive, and once in a while, just plain weird. The tools of the trade are simple: vellum made from stretched calf skin, ink crafted from oak galls and iron salts, pens whittled from feathers, and the occasional knife to scrape away mistakes. There's no undo button here, just a prayer that you didn't smudge the 8th Amen in a row. A mainstream fact? Irish monastic scriptoria were among the most prolific producers of manuscripts in all of early medieval Europe. The Book of Kells, that shimmering masterpiece of calligraphy and art, is only the most famous survivor of an entire culture that treated lettering like high art and holy duty. You watch a young monk across the room blow gently on a fresh line of script to dry it. His face is dotted with freckles, his hands ink-stained and calloused. He pauses for a moment and rubs his wrist. Carpal tunnel, it seems, existed long before office jobs. Suddenly, a shout from outside. The bell tower. A distant clang echoes through the cloisters. You stiffen. Is it a Viking raid? No, just Brother Kieran announcing that dinner is boiled cabbage again. You're safe. For now. There's a kind of magic here, not the spellcasting type, though old Irish monks definitely believed in a world brimming with angels, demons and saints who performed miracles like healing cows or causing rain to stop on command. No, this magic is the quiet, stubborn act of keeping the light alive, of copying and recopying texts by hand, knowing they might never leave the island but doing it anyway. Quirky detail? One real medieval Irish scribe once scribbled in the margin, "Oh my hand," an agonized little outburst after hundreds of lines of text. Another wrote, "This is a joyless task." Relatable, honestly. Historians still argue whether these monasteries were truly peaceful sanctuaries, or if internal tensions, over food, over status, over who got the warmer corner, boiled under the surface. There's even evidence of scribes subtly insulting each other in code, buried within the script. You settle near the hearth as someone reads aloud from a half-finished gospel. The Latin drones on, occasionally interrupted by the hiss of a damp log or the slow creak of someone shifting on a bench. You lean back against the cool stone and close your eyes. Outside, the storm still roars, but in here, the only sound is ink on skin, breath on parchment, and the slow passage of sacred time. You blink awake, still curled near the hearth, and the room hasn't changed much, except now the candles have burned lower, and the air smells even more like wet wool and regret. The scriptorium is quieter now, almost reverent, but not solemn, because just behind one of the larger stacks of manuscripts, something odd is happening. Brother Finton is hunched over his parchment, but he's not writing another psalm. No, you creep closer and realize he's drawing... Is that a cat? No, wait, it's a cat attacking a Viking. The feline has bared fangs and absurdly muscular arms. The Viking appears to be wearing far too much eyeliner. It's beautiful, ridiculous, and entirely unrelated to the sacred text above it. Welcome to the wonderfully weird world of marginalia. These aren't just idle doodles. They're the hidden life of monastic scribes, the places where, for just a second, they stopped being monks and became humans. Tired, funny, lonely, maybe a little delirious from breathing ink fumes all day, but still very much alive. Feather pens scratch on as you peer at the edges of more manuscripts. On one, a knight is jousting a snail. On another, a pair of rabbits appear to be mugging a man. And over there, a monk drew a chicken playing the bagpipes. You're not sure what the theological point is, but it's clear someone was either bored out of their skull or absolutely hilarious. Mainstream historical fact: Irish monks didn't just copy religious texts, they illuminated them. That meant adding golden flourishes, colourful capitals and detailed illustrations to every page. But sometimes the illumination took a sideways turn. Not every image was biblical. Some were, quite clearly, just for fun. You reach down and pick up a scrap of vellum. It has only one line. This page is very thin. You flip it over. He wasn't wrong. You can see straight through to the other side. There's something so heartbreakingly human in that note. Not profound, just honest. This page is very thin. Same energy as Wi-Fi's slow today. You watch Brother Aidan pause mid-copy, stretch dramatically, and sigh so hard it blows his inkwell lid off. He stares at the ceiling like a man contemplating the choices that led him to transcribe Leviticus in a language he doesn't fully understand. Then, casually, with the flair of a true mischief maker, he sketches a little man poking another man in the eye. This is the unfiltered monastic subconscious. They didn't have comment sections, so they wrote in the margins. There's also a game the scribes sometimes played called interlinear satire. It's when you write something silly between the lines of serious scripture. Imagine trying to translate a passage from the Acts of the Apostles, but someone's written, "Brother Fergus snores like a cow," between the lines. Quiet rebellion? Probably. Spiritual warfare? Less so. Quirky tidbit. In one manuscript, a monk drew a demon whispering into a scholar's ear while the scholar scowled at his book. Underneath it he wrote, "Even devils hate grammar," which may be the oldest known anti-grammar joke in Europe. Historians still argue whether these illustrations were condoned, tolerated, or stealthily slipped in when the abbot wasn't looking. Some believe they served mnemonic purposes or moral symbolism, while others think the monks were just very, very bored. It's not all silliness, though. There are margin notes that record deaths in the community. One quietly mourns, "Today my friend died. It is cold." No name, no date, just grief in 6 words. You let your fingers hover over the fragile ink, as if touching it might somehow reach across the centuries. But before the melancholy sticks, you're drawn to a nearby scroll, with a vibrant blue initial A, so large it needs its own paragraph. Inside the letter, a fox in a tunic reading a book while riding a fish. Honestly, you're not even going to try interpreting that one. As Brother Finton finishes his Viking cat doodle, he leans back, surveys it like a masterpiece, and adds a final flourish. A tiny speech bubble. You lean in. The cat says, "Meow-rg." Profound. You smile despite yourself. At the far end of the room, Brother Murcher, older, half-blind, and as wrinkled as a walnut, slowly flips through one of the older manuscripts. You glance over his shoulder. Among the prayers and chants, someone has written, "Let whoever reads this remember me. I was here." No joke, no drawing, just a footprint in the wet cement of time. Another scribe has added, "I remember," and someone else, years later, "I do not know who either of you are." The monks had a strange, wonderful sense of continuity, of belonging to a shared task that would outlast their breath, their bones, even their jokes about snail duels. You settle back down as the wind knocks against the shutters, the fire pops, the pages turn, and somewhere in the margins, another cat begins plotting its next Viking takedown. You wake to the sound of sniffling. A monk is sneezing into his sleeve while trying not to drop his quill, and the scriptorium feels colder than before. The hearth has dimmed to coals, and now your toes are absolutely numb inside your damp wool socks. There's a steady drip from the ceiling near the corner, and someone has placed a cracked bowl underneath to catch it. Not that it's helping much. Outside, the wind is relentless. Inside, the monks don't bother pretending it's comfortable. One is rubbing his feet while another adds peat to the fire. A few of them have gathered around it, quills laid aside for a moment, hands outstretched, sharing warmth and whispers in a mix of Irish and Latin. You shuffle over and join them. It smells of burnt wood, boiled barley, and slightly fermented onion soup. You wouldn't call it pleasant, but it's familiar now. You notice Brother Aeon, the youngest, holding a bowl of hot ink over the embers, gently stirring it with a twig. Ink thickens in the cold, you learn, and if it's too sluggish, your script will turn blotchy. He dips his feather in, then walks it quickly back to his writing spot, like a relay runner transporting sacred liquid. Mainstream fact: the monks made their ink from a mix of oak galls, iron salts, and gum arabic, creating a deep black that could survive centuries. And they often warmed it over the fire in winter, right next to their supper, which may explain why some manuscripts have faint traces of onion or barley. Accidental seasoning, or perhaps a scribe just got hungry mid-gospel. You sidle up beside a trio of scribes debating something furiously in hushed voices. Not theology, not grammar. No, it's whether Miserere Mei, Deus, should be in a larger script for the Easter liturgy or not. Apparently, Brother Seamus insists on 42 lines per page, no more, no less. You suspect he's the reason someone wrote, "Seamus is a donkey," in a decorative initial last week. The chill seeps into your bones as you return to your bench. You try to rub some life back into your fingers, but they're stiff. Writing for hours in cold, damp rooms with little more than firelight was no easy feat. In fact, scribes often developed permanent hand cramps and neck stiffness. Some even carved grooves in the wooden desk to rest their wrists. Others simply gave up and wrote lying down. Yes, really. One monk wrote a marginal note. "I am writing this lying on my side." Iconic. Quirky detail? A real Irish scribe once wrote, "Oh, my hand is weary though I wrote it well." Another followed with, "You won't write it better, brother." Was that a compliment? A challenge? Pure monk sass? Historians still argue whether these interscribed notes were playful teasing or bitter rivalries smoothed over by spiritual duty. You hear someone behind you stifle a laugh. You turn to see Brother Mael Shecknell grinning at his page. You creep closer, and there it is. A monk sitting by a fire, looking miserable, captioned, "I freeze, I shiver, I write." You nod in sympathy. It's like the medieval version of an office meme taped to a cubicle wall. But not all was hardship, even now, as the fire crackles. A kettle of herb tea steams merrily above it. Made from dried meadowsweet and mint, it smells vaguely medicinal and strongly bitter, sort of like chewing an old boot with healing properties. Still, you sip it. It's warm. It'll do. In the corner, someone begins to hum a droning Irish chant. The notes are slow, repetitive, perfect for copying lines in rhythm. You realise that for these monks, routine is everything. Cold mornings, fire-warmed ink, chant, write, chant again, maybe eat a boiled egg if it's a feast day. And once in a while they complain. One note in the Book of Armagh says simply, "It is cold today. The snow is deep, the ink is freezing." You feel a bond across centuries with whoever wrote that. You're pretty sure they would have liked central heating and fingerless gloves. The fire is built up again, and you can finally feel your toes. A monk scoots over and offers you a round of flatbread still warm from the coals. It's tough, slightly burnt, and weirdly comforting. You sit there, chewing slowly, watching the scribes return to their benches with red noses and determined sighs. One adjusts the wick of a tallow candle. Another gently smooths a new piece of vellum with a pumice stone to get the surface just right. And there you are, still freezing, still surrounded by sacred texts and sarcastic doodles, and honestly, it's starting to feel cozy. You catch yourself staring at a page again. It's beautifully written, minuscule Latin script, perfect spacing, not a smudge in sight. But in the bottom corner, just barely legible, are 3 words: send more parchment. Same energy as every office post-it ever written. The fire is crackling a little louder now, and the wind has finally decided to give the monastery a short break. You stretch your legs, brush crumbs of flatbread from your tunic, and wander toward the far side of the scriptorium where Brother Tig is hunched over something large and curved. It's not a book. It's a skin. A pale, stretched-out calf skin, fastened to a wooden frame, drying in the low heat of the room. You pause. It smells faintly of smoke, salt, and, if you're honest, wet barn. This is vellum, the canvas of medieval literature, and no, is not vegan. Tig runs a knife gently along the edge of the skin, scraping off the last bits of hair and fat, with the same focus someone today might use when frosting a cake. The process is slow, smelly, and not for the faint of heart, but it's sacred work. Without this skin, there are no pages. Without pages, there is no scripture. And without scripture, well, what even is the point of surviving in this wind-blown outpost? Mainstream historical fact? Vellum, derived from young calf hides, was the standard writing material across medieval Europe before paper took over centuries later. It was prized for its durability and smooth surface, and was expensive enough that every inch mattered, no wastage. If you made a mistake, you didn't throw the page away. You scraped it off, said a prayer, and carried on. Brother Tig hands the vellum off to another monk, who begins rubbing it with powdered chalk and pumice to prepare the surface for ink. You watch as a scribe delicately marks the page with a piece of lead to lay out the lines. It's almost like preparing a ritual space. This is the sacred preparation before the holy words descend. Except, of course, sometimes the holy words just won't descend. You wander over to a half-finished gospel, where Brother Ronan sits staring at his blank page, like it just insulted his mother. After a long sigh, he finally dips his quill and writes, "I am very cold and tired, and this parchment is stubborn." Quirky detail? One scribe actually drew a tiny man holding a sword next to a hole in the vellum, as if guarding it. The hole wasn't a mistake. It was part of the skin that couldn't be used, but the scribe made it into a feature. This wasn't destruction. It was decoration, or maybe passive aggression. Historians still argue whether these skin defects were embraced as creative opportunities or reluctantly worked around. In some cases, scribes would write around a blemish like it was a sacred relic. In others, they'd stab it with a drawing of a spear. You sit at a nearby bench and run your fingers along a dried, inked page. The surface is smooth, almost waxy. You can still smell the ghost of the animal it once was. You wonder if the calf it came from ever grazed nearby, wandered through the misty fields just beyond the monastery's walls, unaware it would one day carry the word of God, or at least some snarky margin notes. The cost of vellum also explains why manuscripts are so compact. No wide spacing, no generous margins, unless they were needed for decoration or commentary. And if you made a mistake, well, that's where the knife came in. You scrape, you blot, you move on. Unless the mistake is theological, then you scrape, you confess, then you move on. You hear a soft cough and turn to see a monk gently blowing on a freshly scraped patch of parchment. The faint shimmer where the ink used to be is barely visible. You lean closer and see what had once been. A misspelled Dominus. Understandable, really. Latin's tricky. And heaven help you if you're writing by candlelight on a slightly damp cow. Some of the oldest manuscripts in Ireland still bear traces of these edits, called palimpsests, the original writing faintly visible under the newer script. Sometimes, centuries later, scholars can read the ghosts of earlier words, overwritten by newer texts, like memories layered in dust. There's a kind of poetry in that. Even the mistakes aren't erased, just gently buried. Another scribe drops his knife and mutters under his breath. You hear something that sounds suspiciously like, "I should have become a brewer." You smile. You've heard worse life decisions. Then something curious catches your eye. On the corner of a drying vellum page, someone has drawn a goat, Not just any goat, a goat with wings and a halo, a goat angel. You stare. Underneath, someone has written in tiny letters, "He flew, but not well." You'll be thinking about that goat for a while. The bell rings faintly from the chapel tower, and a few scribes rise to attend vespers. You're tempted to follow them, but something about this parchment corner feels too sacred to leave. A memory, a joke, a flight of imagination, preserved in animal skin and oak gall ink for over 1,000 years. And tomorrow someone will add something new. A phrase, a prayer, a mistake, or perhaps another angel goat trying its best. You lean back, the firelight flickering across drying vellum and half-scraped surfaces, and you wonder how many thoughts and feelings have been absorbed by these strange, beautiful pages, maybe more than the words themselves. You drift back to the same bench, half asleep, listening to the lull of distant chanting and the ever-familiar scratch of quills. The scriptorium has emptied slightly. A few monks remain, hunched in postures that suggest they've fused with their desks. You settle near one of them, an older scribe with wispy eyebrows and a look of permanent exasperation. He's writing in short bursts, pausing every few lines to stretch his neck and mutter something under his breath. Eventually, he leans back and sighs with the weary weight of a man who's just remembered it's Tuesday. You glance at his page, expecting scripture, or maybe a saint's life. Instead, he's written, "Tuesday is the worst day." You blink. That's it. No follow-up. Just a blanket condemnation of the second day of the week, which, honestly, checks out. Irish monks might have been devout, but they weren't above having strong weekday opinions. Quirky detail, one anonymous monk scrawled a note in the margin that read, "Let this book end soon." Another, clearly done with the day's work, simply wrote, "I am very bored," in beautifully spaced calligraphy, of course. You lean closer as the scribe continues his lament. A few lines below, in tinier script, "I sneezed 3 times. No one blessed me. Passive-aggressive monk energy." Off the charts. These little marginal notes weren't accidents. They were glimpses of the scribe's inner world, equal parts devout and deeply human. We're talking about men who believed the devil could corrupt ink, but who also complained when their writing bench gave them splinters. Mainstream historical fact: monasteries followed the rule of St. Benedict, which outlined strict daily schedules for prayer, manual labour, and reading. But Irish monasteries often added their own flair. More copying, more writing, more time alone with your thoughts, and your cold feet. And in between the hours of chanting and translating, they found creative ways to survive the monotony. You pass another manuscript, where a scribe has drawn a man riding a fish, grinning wildly. Above him, it simply says, "Fleeing Tuesday." Okay, maybe not really, but it should say that. At the other end of the room, Brother Donica is muttering rhythmically to himself as he copies a homily. You hear snippets. "Sinners shall perish," "the wicked," "Tuesday." You suspect he's sneaking in a personal agenda. You remember that monk who wrote, "This page is very thin." Nearby, another has scrawled, "This bench is very hard." Both entirely true. You stretch your legs and nearly knock over a candle holder with your knee. Historians still argue whether these complaints were common practice or rare moments of rebellion. Some believe the abbot might have allowed them, a release valve for the daily grind. Others think they were stealthy additions written during long, unsupervised night shifts. Either way, they endured. And now, here you are, centuries later, eavesdropping on a monk's emotional support rant about a weekday. You pause at a different manuscript, this one neat, polished, almost too perfect. You're about to move on, when something in the bottom right corner catches your eye. Tiny letters, barely visible. "The ink is good today. This will be a lucky page." It makes you smile, the idea that a page of Psalms could be lucky, that maybe the ink flowing smoothly meant something good was about to happen, or maybe that the scribe had just had a decent breakfast. And there were worse omens. In another copy of the Gospel of John, someone had written above a blot, "The devil is in this ink." Now that's a bad morning. You step past Brother Cormac, who is fast asleep, face first in a half-finished manuscript. You consider waking him, then decide it's a mercy not to. His quill is still tucked behind his ear, his breath whistles softly through his nose, and he's drooling on Ecclesiastes. Let him rest. You sit again and look around. The scriptorium is a mood board of emotion. Laughter, frustration, exhaustion, reverence, all woven into ink and vellum. The sacred and the petty, the divine and the deeply mundane, all existing side by side. And still, someone is writing. Brother Ailill is copying an Irish gloss, a translation of a Latin verse into Old Irish, squeezed into the narrow spaces between lines. His handwriting is smaller than grains of sand, but sharp and precise. At one point he writes, "This word is strange." You wonder if he meant the Latin or something else. As the candle beside you begins to sputter, you hear one final note from across the room. A monk reading aloud from a worn page, his voice barely a whisper. "Blessed are those who endure." He pauses, then mutters, "Even on Tuesdays." The night deepens, and the scriptorium breathes in long, steady sighs. A few monks have retired to their cells, but the diehards remain, scribes wrapped in cloaks, hunched over their work with the unspoken determination of men who have chosen to fight sleep with ink. You wander toward a cluttered table near the back of the room, curious about a half-finished manuscript that seems to have accumulated more accidents than usual. A paw print smudged in ink, a faint ring left by a clay mug, a suspicious splash of something milky white. It's a mess, but a charming one. Welcome to the real world of medieval manuscript production, the part that didn't make it into the pretty museum displays. Mainstream historical fact? Many manuscripts from Irish monasteries contain unintentional additions, animal prints, food stains, and notes lamenting them. One poor monk wrote, "A cat walked across this page," and there it is, proof in the form of little black smudges, crossing a verse from Isaiah like the cat just couldn't care less. You can almost hear the scribe groaning, quill in hand, watching the monastery cat saunter away after redecorating the Word of God. Quirky detail? In the Book of Kells, yes, that Book of Kells, there's a page where the intricate decoration was clearly interrupted. Right in the middle of a pattern, the artist stops. Historians still argue whether he ran out of pigment, nodded off, or just got so fed up he declared divine inspiration officially over for the day. You lean over the page in front of you. There, in the margin, "Cursed be the mouse that ate this parchment." You glance up, half expecting a mouse to wave at you from the rafters. The monastery is not a sterile workspace. It's alive. Mice nibble the corners of old pages. Cats patrol with bored authority. Cows provide the vellum. Goats provide the milk. And monks, well, monks curse about all of it when no one's listening. You notice another note scratched faintly between lines. "The ink is fading. The night is long. My back aches." You feel it in your spine just reading it. And yet, the scribes keep writing. You wander past a desk where someone has left their tools. 2 quills, a dried-up inkwell, a parchment knife, and something that looks like a candle stub embedded in a turnip. You're not going to ask questions. On the far side of the room, Brother Aina is examining a page with the intensity of someone inspecting a holy relic. He's muttering something about alignment. Apparently the lines are 1/2 millimeter off. In monk terms, that's basically heresy. Beside him, a more relaxed monk, probably Brother Niall, judging by the ink stains on his ears, is flipping through a folio. You catch a glimpse of what he's reading, a poem, handwritten, in Old Irish. It's about a cow, a flood, and a lost shoe. You try not to smile. Poetry was often embedded in these manuscripts, sometimes inserted by the scribes themselves, sometimes copied from earlier texts. Not all of it was spiritual, some of it was just delightfully odd. You move on to a darker corner of the room. Here the candles are fewer, the air heavier. A scroll lies half open, revealing rows of tiny script with dense commentary in the margins. One of the notes says, "If I had more light, I would finish this properly." Another, "This scribe is careless." And finally, "I correct his carelessness." You're witnessing a dialogue between scribes across decades, maybe centuries, like a really slow internet thread, only written on calfskin with knives. You pause at another page, It's gorgeous. Gold leaf initials, swirling knotwork, perfect symmetry. And then, at the bottom, I spilled ink here, let it be a sign. A sign of what? Divine intervention? Human clumsiness? Or just the monk trying to cover for the fact that he sneezed mid-sentence? Historians still argue whether these messes were tolerated as signs of humanity, or fixed whenever possible. Some scribes went back and painted over mistakes, others just left them. You suspect they knew their future readers would understand that being human, tired, cold, easily distracted, wasn't incompatible with holiness. As you lean over a particularly chaotic margin, you spot a sketch of a man running from what looks like a giant goose. Underneath, beware the gander. Is it a warning? A joke? A local legend? You'll never know. You sit back down on a rickety bench that creaks in protest. The fire has dwindled again, casting strange shadows across the walls. You sip the last of your lukewarm herbal tea, which now tastes like peat and lost hope. And then, you hear a scuffle. It's the cat. Of course it's the cat. She struts across the room like she owns it, tail high, eyes glowing in the low light. She hops onto a table, circles once, and plops herself directly on an unfinished gospel. The monk assigned to that page watches her blankly, then sighs and walks away. She is apparently unmovable. You reach for the manuscript beside her. It's marked by small paw prints, a milk ring, and an actual note. Let the reader not judge too harshly. The cat has no fear of God. You're beginning to understand why these monks turn to margin notes for relief. Sacred text is eternal, but spilled ink and smug cats, that's forever. The sea wind returns before dawn, shaking the shutters and moaning through the stone like a restless ghost. You pull your cloak tighter as the candle beside you gutters and dies. The scriptorium is cast into a half-light and the walls seem to lean in. Everything feels quiet, suspended, as if the monastery itself is holding its breath. And then you hear it, the bell. Not the gentle call to prayer. No, this one is sharp, urgent and fast. The kind of bell that makes monks drop everything and run. You follow them out into the courtyard, heart quickening, the stone flags slick with coastal mist. Down the path, past the cold well, and the goats who, as always, are completely unbothered. You reach the outer wall. A lookout points toward the cliffside. Out on the dark horizon, sails. Long, narrow, and wrong. You don't need a history book to tell you what this means. Vikings. You duck behind a low stone wall as a few monks rush to secure the chapel doors. One scrambles to hide a box of relics. Another throws a fur cloak over a pile of precious books and starts dragging them toward the cellar. And one particularly frantic monk, you think it's Brother Ailill, grabs his inkwell before anything else. Mainstream historical fact? From the late 8th century onwards, Irish monasteries were frequent targets of Viking raids. They held silver, food and books, and they were often poorly defended. The raid on Lindisfarne in 793 AD wasn't an isolated event. It was just the beginning. Inside the scriptorium, the panic is quieter but no less intense. One monk is calmly stacking folios in order of importance. Another is whispering what might be a final prayer, or a reminder to please not let Brother Ciaran be in charge of hiding anything this time. You duck back inside, helping carry what you can. Bound pages, rolled scrolls, ink jars, even the cat, who is furious to be disturbed. It's chaos, but it's practiced chaos. This has happened before. Historians still argue whether the scribes had formal plans for raids, or if each attack forced a different kind of triage. Some manuscripts survived because they were hidden in stone chambers. Others, because a monk simply ran faster than the raiders. Quirky detail? A 9th century Irish manuscript called the Lower Breach contains a margin note in hurried script. They are coming. I am closing the book. That's it. No flourish. No benediction. Just a frantic goodbye, inked under pressure. You settle into a corner of the cellar with a few others. The air is thick with damp parchment and fear. A single candle lights the space, illuminating stacks of sacred texts, all piled haphazardly beside dried beans and an alarming number of onions. You watch as Brother Tide clutches his latest work, a half-finished psalter, and mutters, "I didn't even finish the Amen." It's strange, sitting among texts that may or may not make it to tomorrow. One book is open to a hymn. The gold letters glint in the low light. Another is a bestiary, its illustrated beasts peeking out with concerned expressions, as if they know what's coming. Above, there are shouts, the clash of metal, then silence. You and the monks don't breathe. The cat hisses quietly from her spot on top of a sack of barley. Eventually, the trapdoor creaks open. It's Brother Donica, bruised, breathless, but alive. He grunts. They took the silver, burned the east wall, left the books. A pause. Didn't care for Latin. It's a small mercy, a cruel one. Hours later, the monks emerged to assess the damage. A few buildings blackened, the bell cracked, the outer wall breached. But the scriptorium is mostly intact, save for broken windows and a singed corner where a manuscript was turned into kindling. And even that one? Still legible, mostly. The monks get to work right away. Rebuilding is second nature. So is rewriting. You watch as Brother Finton takes the scorched gospel and begins transcribing it anew, the damaged copy beside him like a half-burned memory. This isn't the first time, and it won't be the last. But still, they write. You spot a fresh note in the corner of the new copy. In careful, even script, it reads, "They burned our roof, not our words." It's a statement, a prayer, maybe a kind of revenge. Quill dipped in ink, the monks return to their benches. Pages turn, scraping resumes. Somewhere, someone coughs. And in the margin of a brand new folio, a doodle appears. A Viking with a truly ridiculous beard, being chased by a goose. You nod. That's fair, you're still thinking about that goose. Even as the sunlight returns, dim, watery and reluctant, you drift back into the scriptorium with the others. The wind has softened, the shutters creak less, and there's the faint smell of freshly ground ink and toasted oats. Life in the monastery, after its brush with ruin, has resumed like it never paused. That's the thing about this place. It persists. But something's shifted. The scribes seem more introspective today. Their margin notes are gentler, less grumpy, and as you wander among the benches, you begin to notice a different kind of writing showing up between the lines. Not jokes, not curses, not laments about Tuesdays or cats. These are secrets. You sit beside Brother Fiacre, who's working on a gospel folio with extraordinary focus. His pen glides like a hawk in flight, not a drop out of place. But near the bottom, you spot it. Faded, tiny, but intentional. I dreamed of Bridget. She told me to stay. Mainstream historical fact. Irish monasticism in the early medieval period was steeped in visions, dreams, and local saints. Saint Bridget of Kildare, in particular, was said to appear in dreams, offer guidance, and occasionally prevent disasters by divine suggestion. Monks recorded these moments in private notes, rarely meant for public reading. You flip through more pages and find similar whispers. He saw a fire and woke the brothers, or the storm was calmed after we prayed to Columba. Small miracles, layered among psalms. Quirky detail? One manuscript includes what might be the earliest known drawing of a man sneezing and being blessed in the same breath. The margin note reads, "Coleman sneezed thrice. A star fell. We took it as a sign," which frankly is a mood. Historians still argue whether these records were metaphorical, devotional, or actual diary entries. Were they meant for God, the community, or just the writer's soul? Either way, they make the margins feel alive, emotional, messy in the best way. You slide onto a bench beside another scribe who's halfway through copying a hymn. On the side, barely visible under the arc of a decorative S, you see, "She smiled at me during prayer." You glance up, the monk is definitely blushing. This is another side of monastic life. The deeply personal, the inward struggle, the longing. Yes, they took vows, poverty, obedience, celibacy, but they were still human. And sometimes, the margin was the only safe place to confess what couldn't be spoken aloud. Nearby, someone has doodled a bird. Long neck, awkward feet, and an undeniably goofy expression. Underneath, he visits me in dreams. You wonder if the bird is symbolic, or if this is just a recurring nocturnal peacock problem. You keep moving, drawn to another page where the script is tight, almost agitated. It reads, "I think I saw an angel once, but he did not speak." That kind of uncertainty feels more modern than you expect. It reminds you that doubt and faith lived side by side here, line by line, letter by letter. Then you stumble on something unusual. A coded note, not obvious so, but the letters are strangely spaced. The Latin, off. You squint, rearrange it in your head, and realize it's an acrostic. The first letters of each word spell, "I miss home." No further explanation. Just a lonely message left like a carved name on a tree. You lean back, noticing now how many of these secret notes exist. In margins, between lines, even hidden in elaborate capitals. It's a tapestry of inner lives, stitched invisibly alongside divine verses. And then, your favourite so far, a tiny line, written in an arch between two paragraphs of a saint's life. "I'm still here." 3 words, written in a different hand, maybe a century later. It hits like a whispered reply. Someone found the first note, and instead of erasing it, they added to it. Quiet continuity, an invisible conversation across time. And that's what this whole place feels like. The world's slowest group chat, stretched across centuries, using calfskin, ink, and doodles of saints and chickens. You pull closer to the fire, which is now built high and hot. The monks warm their hands. One hums a tune, another reads aloud from a life of St. Kieran, who once rode a fox like a horse. You don't even blink anymore. You glance at one final page before resting your eyes. In the corner, the tiniest writing yet. "If you are reading this, pray for me." You close your eyes. You do. You wake, slowly, the scent of warm peat and wax still lingering in the air. The fire has dwindled to embers again. Outside, the wind has quieted to the occasional whistle through the slits in the stone. There's a peace now, the kind that settles only after storm and scramble. You wander back to the benches and spot something new on the table. Parchment so finely stretched it almost glows, laid out under a weighted board. A scribe is preparing to begin a new gospel. The moment feels reverent, ritualistic. And then you notice the letters. Tiny, unbelievably tiny. You blink, squint, lean in. It's real. The text is so small it feels like it's meant to be read by ants or saints with microscopic vision. Mainstream historical fact: Irish monks developed an exceptionally fine, minuscule script to conserve parchment. The smaller the letters, the more text per page. With vellum expensive and time-consuming to produce, space had to be used wisely. No word was wasted, literally. Quirky detail? In one manuscript, the lines are so compact that modern scholars originally mistook it for decoration. Only after scanning it with magnification did they realise. It's an entire psalm. Just really, really small, like should have come with a magnifying glass small. Historians still argue whether this tiny script was purely economical or if it held spiritual meaning. Some believe the act of focusing so intently on each minuscule letter was itself a form of meditation, a way of writing that blocked out all else, noise, hunger, even the wind gnawing at the monastery walls. You sit near Brother Ruadon, who's bent over a sheet of vellum, tongue peeking from the corner of his mouth. He's writing in a style so fine you could swear it was etched with spider legs instead of a quill. Each line takes minutes, each word a prayer. You watch him pause, flex his cramped fingers, and mutter something that sounds suspiciously like, "Curse this miserly margin." You chuckle. He glares, but there's a flicker of amusement in his eyes. Space saving wasn't just about script size, though. You notice how little punctuation there is, no spaces between words, just a rhythmic flow of Latin letters, bumping into each other like monks during a windy procession. This script, insular minuscule, wasn't just tiny, it was dense, efficient, nearly unbreathable. You try to follow one sentence and immediately get lost. Somewhere between Dominus and Illuminatio, your eyes begin to water. The monks read these texts aloud to catch errors, because silently passing that alphabet soup was nearly impossible. You glance at another page and notice something odd. A doodle. Yes, again. But this time it's not playful, it's instructional. A scribe has drawn a tiny finger pointing to a section in the text. Next to it, here, Brother Kieran misspelled, resurrects it, do not repeat. A built-in editorial note, respect. You look closer. In the upper margin, squeezed between the decorative knots of a gilded Q, someone's written, "One must write small to be remembered." It's haunting. You wonder if it's humble pride or quiet desperation. Further along the bench, another manuscript catches your eye. This one's different. It's a mix of Latin and Old Irish. The Latin in standard script, the Irish in a cramped hand that wraps around the column like ivy. It's not just translation. It's commentary, context, gossip, disguised as exegesis. The bishop in Cork wears red slippers. He is vain. You burst out laughing, but quietly. Brother Don Carr doesn't even flinch. He's already seen that one. You spot another monk using a goose quill sharpened to a needle's point. He dips it with surgeon-like precision, scribbling what seems to be a line from Genesis, or possibly a grocery list. It's hard to tell. And then you catch a margin note that reads, "Too small, eyes sore, still worth it." That one hits. You realize the act of writing this small was not just about saving space. It was about fitting yourself into the page, making yourself invisible but present, anonymous but necessary, like mortar between ancient stones. You sit with that thought. One monk walks past, carrying a page the size of your hand, covered top to bottom, with tiny script, and one bold, defiant final line. No one can say I was idle. You nod. This, you realize, is devotion, measured in millimeters. As the candle burns lower and your eyes grow heavy again, you find one last page. No margin doodles, no snarky Latin. Just clean, tight lines of scripture, so small they almost shimmer. And at the very bottom, "This took 4 winters. May it be read." You're beginning to know the rhythm of the scriptorium by heart. The slow crack of the fire, the rustle of parchment, the near-religious sighs of scribes stretching their spines after 20 pages of psalms. You've even learned where the warmest spot is, right beside the herb-drying rack, where rosemary hangs like blessings. It's here that you find the final manuscript, not the grandest, not the oldest, but the one that seems to hold the most character. You ease it open. The first page is serious, Genesis, Latin, well trimmed. The second slightly smudged. The third? Well, the third has a rabbit in the margin, wearing boots. You found it. The book with the best bits. This manuscript isn't one monk's work, it's a patchwork, a relay race across generations. Different hands, different inks, even the decoration style shifts from solemn to silly and back again. This book was loved. It was used, reused, finished, and then fiddled with. Mainstream historical fact: manuscripts in medieval Ireland were often copied and recopied by multiple generations of scribes. In fact, some books contain marginal notes written hundreds of years apart. It's like a family heirloom, but with better grammar. Quirky detail? On one page, a scribe copied a prayer, and directly below, another scribe wrote, "He wrote this too quickly." A third added, "Mind your own quill." Monastic shade. You turn a page and find an elaborate initial, D, curled with golden vines. Inside the letter, a monk naps in a hammock made of Celtic knots. Underneath, a line reads, "May future readers forgive our weariness." It's a strange, beautiful thing, this mixture of reverence and exhaustion. You imagine them writing late into the night, hands shaking, back aching, praying the ink wouldn't run out before the Amen. Historians still argue whether these pages were edited or left as is, out of respect. The prevailing theory? If it made it onto vellum, it deserved to stay. You turn the next page. Someone's tried to draw a lion. It has 3 ears, crossed eyes, and looks more like a confused dog with a wig. Underneath, Lion of Judah, don't laugh. You laugh anyway, quietly. You begin noticing patterns. Some pages end with short invocations, "Remember me, Lord," or "Let this ink serve well." Others end with small, stubborn jokes. Finally done, "If someone adds more to this book, I shall haunt them." And then, pages later, added by Fergus, "Come at me, ghost." You close the manuscript for a moment. It feels almost wrong to laugh so much while surrounded by scripture. But you suspect the monks would approve. After all, they were the ones who wrote in the margins, who painted cats in mitres and saints riding dolphins, who scribbled their Tuesday complaints beside sacred hymns, and still somehow every book made it to the last page. You rest your head against the cool stone and listen. The wind has died, the fire just coals now. The monks have gone to their cells. Even the cat, queen of the scriptorium, is curled up in a pile of old robes, finally sleeping. Everything is still. The candles flicker, low and soft, casting golden halos across worn wooden benches. The smell of ink lingers, earthy and old. The scent of vellum, faintly sweet and sour, clings to the air like a memory. You close your eyes and picture the margins, the careful lines, the smudged fingerprints, the dreams scribbled between psalms, the doodles no one was supposed to see, all the monks who laughed quietly as they copied lines in freezing rooms, who paused mid-prayer to draw a cow, who whispered, "Let the reader remember me." And you do, you remember them. In the stillness, you feel it, their presence in every corner of this place. Not ghosts exactly, just echoes, the kind that linger long after ink has dried and parchment has curled at the edges. So you breathe slowly now. Let your mind drift. Let the lines blur. You are safe. You are warm. You are remembered too. Let your thoughts curl like the script of a tired monk's final page, and let sleep take you gently like a candle winking out.